The Budget 2024-25 highlights has been released at our video last week, and the tax refund limit for 2023-24 has been reduced to $3,000. For married couples or families who want to find ways to save money, which one is more tax efficient, filing jointly or separately? Married couples can choose to file a joint tax return under the salary tax. In addition, the government has increased the tax exemptions for many children in the policy address. If you want to save taxes, you must first understand the calculation method of the joint tax return for couples, and whether it is more cost-effective to break down the joint tax return for couples. Let's dive in. And if you like this video, drop a like and subscribe to Connect Dots channel for more business tips. Hello, we are Connect Dots Limited, a corporate service provider. Our experienced specialist serving many different entrepreneurs over the last decade is ready and here to provide comprehensive advice to you. We have the whole team here to manage your particular startup, company bank account opening and company maintenance needs, including registered office address, company secretary, and many more. Why file a joint tax return? If a married couple chooses joint tax assessment, it means that the income of both taxpayers will be calculated together. The total income will be reduced by the married person allowance and other allowances. This tax assessment method has the opportunity to reduce the final tax payable, which in disguise means that there is one more way to achieve tax savings. How to apply for a joint tax return? Regardless of whether you choose separate assessment or joint assessment, both parties must fill in their own tax returns. The Inland Revenue Department will automatically calculate which tax filing method is more advantageous for married taxpayers. Taxpayers only need to sign back the consent form for changing the tax filing method issued by the Tax Bureau after the tax assessment, and they can pay a lower tax. If the income of a married person or one of their spouses is less than the basic allowance, joint assessment will theoretically be beneficial to them. In this case, the two persons must each complete an individual tax return or BIR 60, choose joint tax assessment in Part 4.4 of the tax return, and sign and complete Part 12 at the same time, and the joint tax assessment must be resubmitted every year. Subsequently, the two will only receive a notice of assessment. If the combined assessment cannot reduce tax, the assessing officer will issue separate notices of assessment for them. If tax is assessed separately, a married person and his or her spouse are taxed separately as separate individuals. If you and your spouse both have income chargeable to salaries tax, you must complete separate tax returns to declare your income and claim expenses and deductions. The assessor will issue notices of assessment to you separately, and the tax you have to pay has nothing to do with your spouse's income. Please note that couples with more than one child cannot each claim the tax exemption for one child. One of the parents must apply for the tax exemption for all children. Policy Address 2023. The government encourages childbirth and expands multiple child tax exemptions. The 2023 Policy Address mentioned that a number of incentives will be provided to encourage childbirth. In addition to the 20,000 Hong Kong dollars cash reward for newborn babies, it also includes increasing a number of child-related salary tax exemptions, including home loan interest tax deductions and residential rent tax deductions. If when living with a new child from October 25th, the tax exemption limit will be increased to 120,000 Hong Kong dollars. In addition, expenses for assisted reproductive services can also be claimed as tax deduction, up to a limit of 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. In addition to the child tax exemption increased in the budget at the beginning of the year, the latest tax exemption measures to encourage childbirth are listed below. Calculation methods and examples of joint tax returns. Example 1. A married couple filing a joint tax return with one child and one of the children's income is less than the basic exemption amount. In 2023-24, The monthly salaries of Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith are $60,000 and $10,000 respectively. They have a daughter, and they both agreed to nominate Mr. Smith to apply for child allowance. In the case of separate tax assessment, since Mrs. Smith's monthly salary is lower than the basic tax exemption amount, since she does not need to pay taxes and only needs to be paid by Mr. Smith, after deducting the basic tax exemption amount. The increased child allowance and tax after the reduction, he should pay tax of 56,800 Hong Kong dollars. However, in the case of joint tax filing, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith's tax exemptions can be used together. After deducting the married person's allowance, the increased child allowance and tax reduction, only 53,740 Hong Kong dollars is required. It can be seen that the combined tax return can reduce the tax payment by 3,060 Hong Kong dollars. Example 2. Couple filing joint tax return with one child. On the contrary, if the monthly salaries of Mr. Chen and Mrs. Chen in example 1 are $60,000 and $30,000 respectively in 2021-22, both of them need to pay tax according to their income tax returns. Under separate assessment, the total tax payable by the couple is $56,800 plus $17,700 equals $74,500. In the case of filing jointly, the total tax payable by the couple is $92,500. Under the above circumstances, there is no advantage in choosing joint assessment. The Inland Revenue Department will notify the taxpayer and his spouse in the assessor's notes column in the notice of assessment, and assess the tax separately for them and issue separate notices of assessment. Generally speaking, it will be more advantageous for the parent who earns the higher income to apply for the child allowance. However, if one of the parties is assessed at the standard tax rate, it will be more advantageous for the other party to apply for the child allowance. You don't have to worry about unfavorable situations that may arise if you choose consolidated tax assessment by mistake, because Inland Revenue Department will automatically make a comparison and proactively advise them to apply for consolidated tax assessment when it is beneficial to them. However, since the choice of consolidated tax assessment is voluntary, the authorities can only make further judgments and carry out consolidated tax assessment after receiving a valid application. It is worth noting that married taxpayers who choose joint assessment must reapply every year. There are time limits for choosing or cancelling combined assessment, including making an application within the year of assessment or a subsequent year of assessment, or the application must be made within 1 month after the assessment, or the assessment becomes final, or within such longer period as the Commissioner considers reasonable in the circumstances. After deselecting consolidated assessment, you cannot elect consolidated assessment again in the same year of assessment. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to like this video, share it with your friends. Stay informed, stay empowered, and see you next time.